Right. This is going to be a mistake to show the community. But oh well. All I want you to do is keep an eye on the health of the bars. That's right. An Eo was able to do a quarter of a Barsboldia's health in one hit. Hello. So, not long after receiving the Rex TLC, we also ended up receiving the Eo TLC. And even though I'm not a big fan of Apex gameplay in general, it's good at least that Tyrannotitan now has at least more than one thing to rival it in terms of strength. Along with both the things that receive changes getting some playstyle options for you to choose from. Example, say Rex, I love the fact that you can actually just be an ambusher if you like. Or if you want to talk about Eo, you can stay with the same kind of focus as before, as being hyper aggressive, just kill the thing before it kills you, because Eo is simple in that way. Or you can spec into blocking attacks and becoming super defensive and just trying to outweigh your opponent. But today, as stated in the title, I'm going to show you how to break Eo. And when I say break Eo, I mean turn it into the fastest killing thing in the game. I am sorry. Oh well, let's get on with this, shall we? Now, seeing as this is a purely offense-focused setup, on Eo he has a thing called Honed Edge, which makes the Sharpen Horns ability just more potent, have a shorter cooldown, and also use less stamina per use, leaving it more room to chase after you, spamming more head slams. The attacks you're going to be wanting to use, well, you're going to just be ignoring block altogether. Just use head slam and the basic headbutt. The Honed Edge passive that boosts the Sharpened Horns ability makes it go from a 15% damage increase up to 30% damage increase, if I remember correctly. And as for using the attacks that we're using on Eo, we pretty much just want as much uptime of just constant non-stop attacks as possible. You could look at Head Slam on Eo as a similar kind of use to Heavy Bite on Tyrannotitan, although there is quite a difference in damage. It's more as a burst kind of attack that you interweave in the middle of all of your other weaker hits. So, Sharpened Horns with Honed Edge is a 30% damage increase, and then Head Slam on Eotrike is 95 damage, so all we gotta do here is take that 95 damage and multiply it by 30%, which then brings us to 123.5 damage. Which, needless to say, is nothing to sneeze at, as this is just what it can do alone. But let me assure you that this can get so much more silly, I promise you. And we ended up choosing some specific things to actually send it over the edge, in which we ended up choosing a Lamb, a Struthi, and a Rhamphorhynchus. Now, usually when everyone sees a Lambio, they just immediately assume that, hey, it's just gonna heal the Eo, and the Struthi, or whoever it's with. But no, instead, for this, idea, we went with Combat Call Lamb. All for the sole reason of buffing up the attack damage of the Eo even further, bringing that previously 30% damage increase from Sharpened Horns with Honed Edge up to 55% increased damage, which is then bringing our damage from 123.5 up to 147.25. I could also save us some time and mention that we are using a Struthi as well, and they also have some combat calls, though they are considerably weaker compared to Lambs in terms of increasing itself and its group members' damage per hit, only providing a 10% damage increase. So, let's do this again. So we have 95 damage, and then we can end up multiplying that by 65%, which then brings us to 156.75 damage. And finally, just to round it off, we'll be bringing a Rhamphorhynchus, which ends up providing an additional 20% extra damage from Plotting Whispers, which is then bringing us up to 85% increased damage for our EO. So, let's do this again. 95 damage, multiplied by 85%, which then brings us to 175.75 damage. Yeah, this is getting a little silly now. So, needless to say, anything that is going to get on the wrong side of an EO is going to absolutely explode. But we also need to remember that EO does have a 3-second cooldown on its head slam, so it's not like it could really spam the attack, right? Well, you see how Struthies only ended up bringing us a 10% damage increase? That, as I mentioned before, is per hit. The true power of Struthi's combat calls is the one at the bottom right there, Swift Tempo. Decreases the ability cooldowns by 25% for all group members within 15 meters for 15 seconds. Now, this may not sound too impactful, but have a look at this. Yeah, it pretty much makes it so that the big attacks that are supposed to be used for burst damage in the middle of your normal, weaker attacks, usually, be able to just be spammed. Whether it's the head slam off of EO, the rodeo kick of Lamb, or hell, even the Alberta's stomp attack. That looks so dumb, mate. So you see what we have right here, right? We have practically something that is able to throw out Sarco charge bites non-stop at everything. Imagine that. You do not want to face tank this thing. Not only will it just stand there, out-damaging you each hit with absolute certainty, but it'll also be attacking way faster than you. And funnily enough, it'll already be taking way less damage anyway with all the buffs active, due to the armor calls, in which it goes up to 35% extra armor for the EO. But I think that's enough of explaining all the math and the thought theory for, doing this kind of setup.
Yeah, right.
And how about I show you some examples now? I have a couple of fights, along with some funny moments, and even a funny death that I ended up getting earlier on. And with all that out of the way, I hope you all enjoy. Now, recently, over the past week and a half, I've been using Struthi quite a lot whenever my friends are playing on herbivores, for the main fact of the combat call that reduces the cooldown on attacks. And since EO's TLC had been released, I have been wanting to see how strong we can truly make it. Though, while I was watching Morkrom's stream, he ended up asking, "Hey Hunya, would you like to join and possibly test how strong we can truly make an EO?" And he had the exact same thought as me, bringing a Struthi, a Lamb, and a Rhamphorhynchus, and also for the EO to be fully set up with just full aggression. And so I ended up choosing to be on Struthi, while Frozen was on their Lambio, Morkrom being the EO, and Saka being the Rhamphorhynchus. I salute you, Saka. So we ended up all, getting the herbivores in a group and heading to the one place on the map where we knew that there would be people, which obviously has got to be Crater. And at first, all there really was available that the EO would be able to catch is a Rex, that at this point was half health. Though that didn't stop us from, just buffing up, getting Morkrom ready, and having him just charge in. Now, this Rex being half health, as I said, obviously it isn't very impressive. Of course an EO would win that fight, right? But just how fast that Morkrom, with all these buffs, ended up taking out all of, half of the Rex's health bar. What can you say about that? There was also another Rex sitting in the Crater Pond, because, Crater, and as you would have guessed, protected by a Sarco. Though, Funnily enough, since it was so soon after we just killed that first Rex that we ended up spotting the next Rex in the pond sitting there, we still had the lamb buffs, which last way longer than my Struthy buffs, so all I had to do was just, buff up Morcrom yet again, and also have Saka buff up Morcrom yet again. And like that, he was ready to just storm the pond and kill the Rex. Or at least I would like to say that he killed the Rex, though you can see it's definitely just one more hit. I think a fly could have farted on this Rex and it would have exploded. I would say the most dangerous thing here right now for us was pretty much just the Alpha Dynamo Sukas. That is, just adding bleed and just doing tons of damage. It's practically the only thing that could actually just face tank Morcrom right now. And so we were trying to ready up and kind of wait for our buffs, ready for Morcrom to try and storm the pond again and finish off the Rex. Though, a Hats ended up coming in and going after Frozen. And do you want to have a guess who this Hats was? Well, of course, it was the first Rex that died. Players proving that Hats is just a revenge pick 90% of the time. Every time. And, well, as you can see, they've done a good number on Frozen right here, though they ended up taking half their health loss from just the Dynamo Sukas trying to tail smack it to death. The Hats can obviously just rest anywhere they want, so the only way to really stop them from killing Frozen right now is actually just to, well, be in the way of them when they try to do the little strafing runs. They did keep trying, they were pretty persistent, and so was I to try and match them in elevation. Though, Saka, as you may have heard, in the pond, ended up dying to Morcrom of all things. They were trying to buff Morcrom and got hit by the head slam as they were pounced on Morcrom's neck at the time. So they ended up coming back on a Hats. Seeing as, this guy pretty much switched from Rex to Hats for the revenge kill, I guess Saka was thinking on their toes. It was quite a badass looking chase. Two Hatses just trying to do a little dogfight and just an aerial dance. But their Hats ended up landing next to the water, thinking that the Rexes would maybe help them. But, yeah, finished off by Saka's Hats. And that was when then Saka went back to Ramf and worked on bringing that back over. And as for me, Frozen, and Morcrom, well, Morcrom's got a heal, and so does Frozen. Thankfully, Frozen is using Healing Presence, which allows themselves and people in their group to heal 25% faster while the Lambio is sitting down or sleeping. But anyway, we ended up healing up and going back into Crater and waiting for Saka to get back. We ended up seeing that the Rexes are still at the edge of the Crater Pond. And so while waiting for Saka, Morcrom decided to go full Bushwookie, hiding his presence from the two Rexes. Until it was finally time to just fill him up on all those juicy buffs. And so Morcrom, having faith in all the buffs applied to him right now, all except the Rampharinkus Mocking Whispers, which is another 20% extra damage. Though, with the armor and the bonus damage and the bonus attack speed, Morcrom, yeah, he's very confident that he would be able to survive anything that happens here. Now, as for my Struthy buffs, the range for applying them to group members is way shorter, and also the calls themselves they last nowhere near as long. So I did have to risk jumping into the water to reapply the buffs just to make sure. But I think, it wasn't really a problem, as you can see. That's one Rex dead, and two Rexes dead. Though the Hats did end up coming back. The one that Saka killed. Yeah, proving yet again, Hats is a revenge pick 90% of the time. Every time. But after a few unfortunate hits for that Hats, and being annoyed by the Ramph, they ended up flying off. And we ended up just filling up our water, and Saka ended up scouting around, seeing if there was anything in Grand Plains. In which, guess what? there was a Rex and a Bars at the top of the ramp, along with then an Eo and an Amarga also on the way, along with their own lamb. How interesting. So, Frozen's combat calls were off cooldown, so we ended up just quickly buffing up Morcrom, and then going straight for the Eo first off. Followed up by going for the Lambio, in which guess what? He ended up actually two-shotting the lamb. And then also just pretty much putting the Amarga straight to death scars in 2 seconds. Now, there was another group in Crater, full of Pycnos and Achillo, a Metri, and they kind of just tried to help us. We didn't really attack them because our group is all based around just buffing an Eo, and just making that thing ridiculously strong. And, well, an Eo wouldn't be able to catch a bunch of Pycnos, a Metri, and a Achillo. What's the point? It's like trying to chase the Flash, right? We really are just set up just to hunt and kill other apexes. Hunt is a funny word because we're herbivores, but you get what I mean. But how would we be able to just catch other apexes that pretty much have the same stamina as an Eo? Well, Struthi has this funny little ability called Slipstream, which increases the movement speed of its group members behind it, or just say any other herbivore behind it. It doesn't even have to be in a group. And I ended up just buffing the movement speed of Morcrom's charge to catch up to the other apexes we wanted to kill. Knowing that he was super buffed up, he had confidence that he could just go in, swinging wildly at everything that, was even remotely the same size as him. Hitting the Rex with a charge, a head slam for the Bars, eventually settling on the other Eo, which, needless to say, went down pretty damn fast. Now, the other group, the Pycnos, the Metri, the Achillo, they were kind of just trying to stay out of our Eo's way, knowing what a normal, Eo, not super buffed up, would do to them. And let's just say Morcrom, he was cutting it pretty close, and yeah. This is the kind of case where we kind of wish we just had a healer Lambio, right? But hey, if we didn't have this setup in the first place, we wouldn't have done as much as we have done. They don't even really want to try going after the EO. They want to try and play defensive because they've tasted what the EO is dishing out right now while super buffed. And as the old saying goes, your best defense is an enemy that is no longer alive. And so this entrance is clearly just being blocked off with pretty heavy damage, being that there is a Rex and a Bars ready to tail slam or munch whoever get to the entrance of the cave. So me and Frozen ended up going to the other entrance, where it seems that the other Pycnos, or the other group that was after these guys, were also having the same thought as us. And I'm about to show you why getting in the middle of big things when they're fighting is a bad idea. Yeah, I ended up just taking a full-on head slam, and that Pycno pretty much just lost 20% of his health because of recoil damage. The other group also seemed to have some raptors that wanted to join in, or maybe this was another group entirely. I don't know, I couldn't really track. There was just a lot of people here. But either way, they went after the very, very death-scarred Bars right here. At least before Morcrom ended up bulldozing it over. Which was then followed up by pretty much just the Pycnos and Frozen finishing off the Rex. Now, I gotta say, it's quite evident and quite clear to see how death-scarred Morcrom's EO is, and I can't lie, I was fully expecting them to just attack us right afterwards. It's like, oh yeah, a temporary truce, now die kind of deal. But they didn't, so, I guess we were lucky. It's just the kind of thing you expect on official servers. So we ended up heading down to the river, filling up our water, and then heading to the berry bush. Fill up our food, we need to heal up, otherwise Morcrom is going to die on the next fight. Though, he ended up spotting another EO. Just a, almost adult EO. They must have died not long beforehand. And so he ended up going after it. The problem here is, he's barely healed. but there's no stopping him. The guy has the Eo curse. You could put the nicest person on Eo and they'd turn blood raged. And so we just buffed him up, just to, save him from himself at this point. And, well, let's just say this Eo, they got hit twice and said, no more, please, and just hopped into the water. Where then, they just got killed extremely quickly. But now that Morcrom has had his bloodlust satisfied, or, with a air-quote one-on-one fight, never mind all the buffs that he's receiving. Only now will he spend his time, doing a little bit of eating and healing up. At least until Saka ends up calling out that the Amarga that we were fighting beforehand, well, they've been spotted in Grand Plains and were being chased by the Picnos, and so Morcrom wanted to finish the job that they started beforehand. Now, as you all know, fighting an Amarga these days is actually a pain in the ass, just because of the amount of knockback it does. And it also does a ton of damage. It does more damage than its headbutt. It's crazy. But because of that knockback that it does to everything, I wanted to try and stop the knockback that Morcrom was receiving by just getting behind Morcrom and just, being like a little wall. But I ended up... Yeah, something just happened that I didn't expect, but it was very funny. Oh, I was behind you! This just proves that Eo's head hitbox is bigger than its entire body, including its head. And after my walk all the way from Hoodoo Expanse, Morcrom and Saka and Frozen said that there are 2 Eos in Crater. And so, we're gonna test out, pretty much making this a 2v1. So, what is stronger? A mega buffed Eo, or 2 Eos just outright? Find out, not next time, but right now. So, the melanistic Eo ended up taking the charge, which kind of skated off, and it ended up panicking and doing a panic charge in a random direction, while Morcrom then just face tanked the other Eo, and just absolutely destroyed it outright. Which, just about 2 or 3 hits later, then finished off the Mela Eo that was already pretty damn hurt from that one charge. Mate, it's busted, mate. That's so busted. I'm not gonna lie, I've been already working on gathering footage to, show the power of Struthy, combined with pretty much anything that it can group up with. But this is what I've been saying for so long. I mean, you could have interesting combinations like this, where you actually put thought into it, right? And you do timing and a little bit coordination, and, we've actually got to sync up with each other to say, hey, you buff me now, and you buff me now, and I'll buff here, and we'll go for this, but instead, like 90% of the community just says, oh yeah, let's all go Spinos, oh, let's all go Rex, let's all go Big Thing and just walk at the enemy. There's zero communication except for, oh, let's go for this one thing. Now, why did I go on that little rant right there? Well, think about our group right now. We have a Struthy, a Lambio, and a Rampharinkus. All of them are focused on one thing, and that is buffing the Eo. They are not made to actually do damage, really. The Lambio can do damage, the Struthy can do damage, but that's not their focus. If anything's going to come along and actually try to attack us, we're just going to get away from them. We're not going to fight, we're just going to call our Eo that is super mega buffed up to take all the focus off of us. And, be the one with the primary role of actually killing. We're just there to make its job easier. And that is really the direction that Alderaan are trying to push the game towards mechanics and buffing. I mean, the Raptor packs are a perfect example, especially with a killer mob boss, along with a bunch of Deinonychus and Latin Venatrix. It's literally made so that everyone is buffing each other, and that's how they get their power. Sure, they got a lot of numbers, but they're super squishy, and that's how it's supposed to be. But I'll be damned if they still don't cause problems for whoever they encounter. And in my opinion, I find that to be infinitely more interesting than just, say, grabbing 5 Rexes and running at someone. Because, you know, you've got enough health and damage that you know that you can just take turns, and the thing you're going after will die. All you gotta do is just sacrifice a little bit of health and take it in turns. I see this whole setup that we are doing right now as, well, we could have just gone for Eos, and we would have just, you know, walked at whoever was there, and we would have, you know, smacked them, and they would have died, and then we would have said, oh wait, I've taken a bit of damage, your turn, you go in. But this right here, just everybody focusing on buffing one person up to be the big, bad, scary thing, is, how do I say, other than just way more interesting? Because, say, if you come across, you know, 2 Tyranno Titans or anything like that, or 2 Rexes, well, the super mega buffed up EO just trounces all over them. And it actually pushes people to actually use the party or group system to get this kind of power in the first place. You ain't getting this, you know, kind of power individually if you go for EOs. That, you know, Morcrom playing EO right here, he said it was one of the most powerful scenarios he's ever felt. He felt, he was like a god, he just walked up to things, and he was able to just demolish it, as you've seen right here. Sure, you won't be able to get everything, because there's some things that you just won't be able to catch, and if they decide to run away from the EO, well, you're probably not killing them, seeing as the rest of your group is not focused around killing. So, it is all based on what one person wants to go after. On a side note, this Rex was very unfortunate to disconnect when they did. But do you want to also know what the counter is to this? It's actually quite a simple solution. You kill the EO support, and then everything falls away. Now, I say simple solution, but it also isn't at the same time. Any group that is already doing this anyway has enough coordination to actually pull it off and get the timing right with each other. And so you are also going to need some coordination in order to break it down. Now, you remember the Amarga and Aloe earlier by the river? They ran away and, you know, smart decision. You just don't want to deal with this kind of EO. It's super buffed up. You can't blame them. It's a smart thing to do. Get away from the thing that is going to kill you in like 3 to 4 hits max. Now, the Amarga and Aloe did actually communicate with a bunch of other people on the server that we needed to be dealt with. You know, a Lamb, an EO, a Struthi, and a Ramp all working together, killing pretty much everything. You know, everyone could just say, oh, we are KOSers. Sure, we were KOSing. Sure, I don't care, personally. But either way, it took some coordination to do so, and they ended up doing it. Sure, they may have lost a couple in the process, like the Picno right there just died, but then they also had some other people actually pulling some roles, like the Aloe trying to keep the EO bleeding, along with the Cerato trying to keep the EO fractured so it couldn't just chase everything super easily, and then also the Styrak going after the Lamb so that it made it harder for, well, us to keep our EO buffed up. But now with our Lamb dead, we've kind of lost the majority of all our damage and the armor that Morcrom was receiving. So that's already one huge step into actually dismantling this team. Along with then Saka being dead because they ended up pouncing the neck of the Trike and got hit by a head slam while Lucky Feather had already been activated beforehand. But yeah, how we were actually killed was a combination of, you know, a bit of coordination, a bit of patience, and people actually playing different roles other than, oh, let's bring 4 Apexes and run at them. Because that wouldn't have worked as well. It wouldn't have worked nowhere near as well as, well, what they did. They used mechanics, and patience and coordination, as I keep saying. They kept the EO busy, they went after the lamb, they kept me from being able to actually stay near the EO because I had someone on me quite a lot of the time there. And even now, they're not just rushing in, mindlessly. They know that they can take their time, even though this EO is, well, it's on the brink of death, as you can see. Look at all the death marks right there. Either way, everything I've been saying was a lot of jibber-jabber, just saying that this setup is extremely strong, but actually has a counter if you try and play against it in the same fashion. But yeah, this was one of the most ridiculous team compositions I have ever seen in this game. And I bet you could probably pull off something similar with Rex for a team composition. That's something I'm gonna have to have a look at in the future. Because this was amazing. I loved it. Pretty much just buffing one person to become a one-man army. I love that concept. And so here we are at the end. Tell me, do you think we might see a few more people attempting this? I would kind of hope so. I would love to see the kind of chaos that this causes. Now, the people who ended up making it this far, tell me, did you expect me to be on the ramp, or did you expect me to be on the Struthy? I think I already know your answer. And lastly, how would you feel about seeing some other silly combinations like this whenever they pop off? Because honestly, they're really fun to try and find out. And especially with all the TLCs that have been coming out lately, I think more and more are going to be popping up. It's kind of helpful, you know, that these TLCs are actually having some funny kit combinations and stuff like that. It helps keep the game fresh for me. But, with all that out of the way, I have rambled on for long enough. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye!